workshop, Inherited National Digital Archives workshop. We're so pleased to have you all here, and especially our guests, lecturers and panelists. Thanks for them coming all the way in snowy weather with a long trip. Thanks for being here. As we have, oh no, you're not seeing my slides. Yes. As you all know, we have shared the program with you that we will be starting with found footage filmmaking workshop today. We will have 3 parts in today's program, and Dr. Claudy Op is here with us. Thanks a lot for accepting our invitation and sharing all your experience on found footage filmmaking. Tomorrow we will be continuing with film AI editing with artificial intelligence workshop. Thanks, Lana for coming and being with us. And on the 3rd day, as you all know, we will have the panel that will be the final event of the workshop, Inherited National Digital Archive panel. And then we will be screening the films that you've been producing for nearly a month, that you have worked with the film Mirası materials that we are so much wondering what is coming out. So it's a great pleasure for us with today's program. I'm sure Claude will be giving the detailed information about today's program, but just to remind you that we will be here with the lecture program till noon, and after the lunch break we will be going on with found footage film selections, screenings, and we will be doing a small exercise like film analysis. And then after the coffee break, we will have chance for mentoring that you will be using here as a workshop area. Connect your laptops, show your projects, get feedback, and Claudy is here for found footage filmmaking workshop. But luckily, we also have Larna and Daria. Daria is from National Film Archive of Czech Republic. She will be the panelist on the 3rd day, but she was so interested in the program that she also wanted to come a little bit earlier to be in the workshops as well. So she is also will be ready for feedbacks and mentoring during these 2 days. Thanks a lot. I just want to introduce each other, the participants, the team, the lecturers, everyone, that we will be here for 3 days with a networking as well. So please stand up, show us yourselves. Our team, I'm Nihan Gider-Işıkban. I was just like the one who started all this hassle for everyone with my interest to film Mirası. And thanks to our department lecturers who are all here now, Professor Dr. Önder Özdem and Dr. Aslı Gön. They will be responsible for the workshops and the participants. If you have any problems with the workshop, your works and anything you will need, they are the ones. And for the broadcast recordings and technical stuff, we have Dr. Çal here. There. And our lecturer Erinç is also will be helping us with the technical stuff, and our research assistant Cihan is on the live broadcast, so thanks a lot. And for administration and hospitality, now they're outside. Our research assistant İclal and Aleyna will be helping you for any needs. And thanks to our volunteers Tılsım and Onur. I don't know if, yes, Azra is also here. Thanks a lot for all the support you've been giving for months. And sorry for all the hassle I caused you for months. And also a quick meeting for our participants as well. The bold ones are the ones who are now here, just to know know each other a little bit better. Please also stand up and show us yourself. Abdurrahman Abdulfatah, our student from Film Department, Başkent University. Berkay Şatır, an academician director from Galatasaray University, all the way from Istanbul. He's here. Sevcan Sönmez, an academician from Yaşar University, İzmir. Hamdi Ekin, from TRT, production and broadcast specialist. And Mustafa Ekinci, he's also from TRT. And Aslı Çakmak, a director assistant and creative director. I think we don't have Cemre is not here for now. Kadir Durdu, our left as you have given the information. He is our student at film department, a waiter, a photographer as well. And Naz Önen Gündoğdu, an academician, filmmaker. She's from Başkent University as well. Fatih Karatekin, video artist. Arda Demir, just show yourself. Our student from Başkent University Film Design Department. Hava Rana Kırhan, architect, assistant director. And Hasan Dönmez, our PhD student from Başkent University. Bilge Güneş, our student from Başkent University. Halil İbrahim Akpınar. Is there anybody left I missed? Newly came? No. Okay. Then we will go on with the new ones coming as well. And that's all. Hope we will have a very productive and enjoyable as well 3 days. So not taking too much time from Claudy, I'm giving the words to her. Thanking again.
Awesome. Yes. Is this on?
Yes.
Hello. Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is so much fun. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here. This is my favorite topic in the whole world. So it's amazing that this is my work, that I get to come here and share all of this with you. I really, really look forward to seeing what you have made. We'll do that later in the day. I'm going to talk you through a little bit about my own background so that you understand why I am here in the first place. Then I'll set out a little bit about what you can expect today. This morning I thought for you to sort of get a sense of maybe the way I speak and what I'm talking about in terms of found footage filmmaking. I'm going to show you lots of clips, lots of different clips, made with archives, made without archives, all of those changes that are happening. And then in the second part, we're going to do an exercise that's after lunch, when hopefully everybody is well caffeinated and energized. And then at the end of the day, we're going to do a little bit of work with you guys, and then hopefully I can mentor that a little bit. So as Leanne said, my name is Claudy Op. I'm a principal academic in film at Bournemouth University in the UK. We also have a Centre for Intellectual Property Policy and Management, so that's CIPIM for short. I'm a researcher in that centre, and it's a complete privilege to work between the two, between film and copyright. Copyright is a subsection of intellectual property, because my entire research is a combination of those two. And I'm currently, this year, I'm a Lemelson Fellow at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. As well. I do have to say something about my practical background. So I studied photography and film, and that's where sort of the physical interest in material comes from. But I have a background at the Netherlands Film Museum in film restoration. And as long as I can remember, I have an interest in found footage filmmaking. I don't think that I call it that way. I was just really always interested in things that were made from existing things. That's sort of the most wide umbrella term I can think of. So I worked for a long time at the Netherlands Film Museum, where we did a lot of really interesting restoration projects. But in restoring films, because you make copies of those films, whether that's analog or digital, at some point you're going to run into copyright, and you have to ask permission from the rights owners to make those copies. That to me was a completely foreign concept, because especially if you cannot find those rights holders, what are you going to do? And so that to me was so fascinating in itself, that you need to get permission from people who you don't know who they are or where to find them. Or if you do find them, they might not know or remember that they still own the rights to those materials. So that's a real problem for archives, but also libraries and galleries and museums. And so I decided to do my PhD on that topic. And that became this book. I'm glad to say it is now open access. So if you're interested in that research, this is a case study of what is now known as the Eye Film Museum in Amsterdam. So I look at access to archival collections and then the copyright issues involved. So you can download this for free, and this gives you a little bit of an insight into the individual chapters. The picture in the middle at the top was the more than magnificent location that we were in. This is on the beach in the Netherlands, because this is where the nitrate films actually are still kept in the Netherlands. Nitrate is kept outside of residential areas, so we were very fortunate to be working there. Then sort of academia happened to me. I thought that I was going to do a PhD and then either go back to the museum or do something more international with that. But I liked academia so much, and I enjoyed the teaching and I enjoyed the research, that I kind of never left the university anymore. I was postdoc in intellectual property, and that was the start of this book. It took four years to make. It's called A History of Intellectual Property in 50 Objects. And in this book, we have brought together 50 authors who each write about one object. Some of these objects are really everyday objects. Some of them are rather obscure, but we try to sketch sort of a history of intellectual property. The 5 I highlighted there are the entries that are film related. So you see Edison's kinetoscope, top left. Top right is Steamboat Willie. This is the Mickey Mouse from 1928, and you might be aware that, what is it today? 4th of December. So within a month, Mickey Mouse is falling into the public domain, which is revolutionary. The topic and the object has some new gained topicality again. Then my own chapter on the paper print. That's the portrait of Ainsworth Rand Spofford, who was the Librarian of Congress at the time when films were registered for copyright in the US in the 1890s. And I did a lot of research into that topic. To the right of that is the Zapruder, recently captured the assassination of John F. Kennedy, a huge copyright story. And then the one in the bottom is one of the first VCR machines, which was at the heart of a really famous case. And that decided that taping something off the television, and I'm assuming so some people might be old enough to remember that you had to stay home if you wanted to watch something on television, but that concept of taping something of the television and then watching it later in your own time, that's a process called time shifting. It was decided in that case that that was considered to be fair use, and arguably that case has paved the way for the way that I think that nowadays we hardly ever watch things anymore when they are being broadcast. So that case was incredibly important for not only intellectual property, but also the way that we today consume that material. Last year, I was a Claudy Fellow at the Library of Congress, where I did research into those paper prints. I turned my research into an audiovisual essay rather than a written paper. And that was a very enjoyable experience, but I would like to argue, you can look it up on YouTube, just type in the shadow line in my name. It's about 50 minutes, not only what I was trying to do, but I also tried to do it as a found footage film where I use a lot of clips throughout film history, because, you know, as so many other people, I've learned a lot about history through Indiana Jones. So, you know, I bring in a lot of those cultural references, but I also try to make that video under copyright exceptions, which is what I'm going to talk a little bit about in the second part, and then we'll do an exercise together. So that's my background. That's sort of how I come to you today. And then, so what we're going to do is, in this first part, I've called this sort of an illustrated lecture. I have prepared lots of clips. Some of them I'm going to show in their entirety. That's only maybe like 6 or 7 minutes. Other films, especially feature films, I'm going to show you the trailer. It's sort of a flight through what I think are amazing found footage films, but also they tell you something about a particular history, which I'll highlight in a little bit. Then that second part, after lunch, I've prepared an exercise. We're going to do some collaborative work where afterwards we're going to talk to each other about it. And then hopefully in the third part, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you've come up with so far. And then hopefully I could do some mentoring. What I would also like to say is interrupt me when you have a question, because don't feel like you have to save it until the end. If anything is not clear, please interrupt me, just raise your hand and ask a question, whether it's about the film or because I would like to make this as lively as possible and not just a monologue from me to you. I understand we're sort of collectively waking up here, but please interrupt me if you have a question. Any questions so far? All good? I'm going to take this off. It's rather warm in Ankara this time of year. I was promised some snow, but that's not happening. Okay, so I thought that this thing that I'm thinking really hard about is the cultural practices that are happening within these institutional archives that we know, versus sort of the cultural practices that are happening outside of archives. And I think you mostly fall into that second category. You work mostly outside of archives, and you are now getting the chance of sort of crossing those boundaries. But I think those two worlds, they show such different ways of dealing with the creative reuse of existing material, that I have the feeling that the concept of the archive is put under pressure a little bit by what filmmakers outside of archives are now able to do. And that's sort of what I want to talk to you about today, because I think that's really fascinating. But I also think the future of archives is changing because of that. So I thought I'd give you a couple of definitions first, like what are we talking about? Because I have shockingly discovered that when my students who are 18, 19 years old, when they talk about found footage, they talk about horror. Mm-hmm. And that to me is not the way I understand found footage. So what we're talking about today is footage that is shot for one use, but then found and repurposed, and so directed towards another use. And that can be horror, but it's not sort of the aesthetic look of particular horror films, which are also called found footage. So found footage filmmaking is, the general umbrella term is making something from something else that already exists. That's like the widest spectrum I can sketch. And some people have called it filmmaking without a camera, which I really like as a description, because you work with the footage that's already there, and that might push you a little bit more towards being an editor, but being a director/editor, rather than shooting footage and then editing that. I hope that makes sense. This is arguably one of the most, amazing books, but also one of the only books on the topic William Race from the 90s. It's called Recycled Images. And I think what's really important to highlight from that book is that he says found footage films, they draw attention to the body of the film itself. So when you're watching them, you actually realize that they're put together from other materials. So it draws this attention to the film's own imageness. And I think, I'm going to show you lots of examples where that's going to be very, very clear. So these films, they invite us to recognize them as found footage, as recycled images. And I think those things are really important to flag up. The topic for me because I'm trying to figure out, why do I think this is so interesting? And I think as a young child, I was just enamored by those Oscar montages of all the people who have died last year, for instance, these really dramatic, put together emotional clips, which sometimes can feel like a film quiz, but there was something happening for me emotionally that I really, really loved. And I'm still trying to figure out why I like the topic so much. And I've come to the conclusion that these films, they evoke many, many questions that I find interesting in general. So this is the found footage cinema exposed book that the I Film Institute put together in 2012 for their grand opening. And the grand opening was all about found footage, because the institution has such a long history of inviting artists in. I'm going to show you some examples of that, to work with their materials. So some of these questions are, right, if you use the work of someone else, what is authorship? Who is the author of that material? Does that become you in putting these things together anew, or does the authorship remain with the original filmmakers? And whoever that is, right? I mean, it can be the screenwriter, it can be the director. So what is authorship? But also, of course, what is ownership? And those two questions are the cornerstone of intellectual property, of copyright. What is authorship? What is ownership? But I realized that found footage films, they bring about these fundamental questions that link them to copyright. But I think when you see clips like this, it also evokes that question: what is even film, right? If you can put together a film from all these other bits that already exist, what does that mean about what film is, and what is film history? Because this is arguably an historiographic intervention that you make with the films themselves, right? So you're trying to write film history with the films themselves. So that to me is fascinating. And then maybe the big one for me is, what is that place that we call the film archive? What is the kind of history that resides in that archive, and how do we get to it? Because arguably we only see 5% in general, on average, of what is available in archives. So 5% is nothing, right? So that to me, all these questions are linked to found footage. I could have chosen very different points of view. Traditionally, I mean, my background, I'm an archivist, so I could have given this lecture as an archivist, or from the point of view as a right from an archive. But I really wanted to choose the point of view from you as filmmakers. What does it mean for you? Because you mostly work outside of the archive, and different rules apply to you there than do within the archive. I kind of also want to say that this is not a new phenomenon, right? So as long as film has existed, people have tried to put together new films from existing bits. We have very early examples from the 20s, from the 30s, from the 50s. These practices are as old as the medium is. But what I would like to highlight is that over the last few decades, and arguably, I kind of want to put the hinging point in the 1990s, where the earliest that I'm going to show you is from 1990. We see a huge change taking place. So in the analog era, so sort of around that time, the sourcing of the material, if you were a found footage filmmaker, it was rather difficult, right? How would you find your material? And so a lot of the earlier found footage films are sort of clustered around these so-called leftovers. They are particular kinds of film, usually on the margin, the educational stuff, the newsreels, maybe literally stuff that as a filmmaker you would have found in the waste bin of a lab, right? There are stories of filmmakers going through the bins of a lab and then taking that material and then turning that into their own films. And that's sort of how found footage filmmaking was seen, right? These films that had fallen out of the mainstream. The material was also very difficult to copy, right? You needed specialist equipment. The analog practices of copying the actual film were very costly. It involved many steps in order to get to a workable copy. And then the distribution of them, so technical obstacles aside, imagine that you had overcome all of that. The actual audience for this material was arguably very underground, right? A festival here and there. These things did not show on television. We didn't have anything like DVDs yet. So this material tended to sort of circulate in more underground circles. And then in the 90s, we start to see this huge change. So now we're solidly on the other side of something, and I think those 20 or 30 years, they show us that change. Today, it is extremely easy to make a copy of something, right? Especially if you already have it in a digital format. It's quite literally one click of a button. And then I think one of the biggest changes that we have seen is that even material that is traditionally seen as very high risk, right, Hollywood material, is now available. So material that was traditionally seen as the ownership of potentially litigious studios who were invested in you perhaps not using their material, it is now available to us. You can rip DVDs, you can download stuff from the internet, you can rip clips from YouTube. Doesn't mean that you own them. I just want to sketch that technically it's so possible to do it that we've solidly gone to a different mode here. And then of course, arguably the biggest change in the last, I want to say 5 to 10 years, but even in the last year, we've seen huge changes. The models of distribution are changing so rapidly fast that the resulting films of what we perhaps can still name found footage filmmaking, but maybe we need new terms for it as well. Material being appropriated. They can amass large audiences online. So all of a sudden it's not so underground anymore. And that is sort of the before and the after. What has definitely changed, sorry, that's not as legible as I thought it was going to be in that color, sorry. So what has definitely changed in the making of this process is the creative practice around it, right? You can sit in your living room doing this, as opposed to all sorts of other things that you needed in the old days. But the role of copyright has changed, and we're going to pick up on that in the second part a little bit more. So in every stage of its development, right? So found footage filmmaking has kind of always been intrinsically interwoven with copyright to make something new out of something existing, right? Questions all those ideas of ownership and authorship, but the rapid changes within that digital context. So it has changed those models of distribution, but it has also changed models of ownership. The importance specifically of copyright has quickly come to the fore. So I want to say 20 years ago, if we had sat here, well, I'm not saying in this specific context, we might have spoken about copyright, but today we actually teach it on our program. 20 years ago, in any film program, that was not normal that you would speak about it or even teach it. Whereas today, I think even small children.
Claudy, may
Yes.
I ask you something just
please.
for it
Yes.
as well? When I think of found footage filming, it's always non-fiction. It feels like
Yes.
it's non-fiction, but when you say even Hollywood, is it also possible to make a fiction film with found footage film materials? It's mostly actuality films, turns out to be a documentary or an experimental film.
Yes, exactly.
But is it also possible to think for fiction?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I can think of a couple of examples, and actually, I don't have any in them. I've seen one last week. So Charlie Shackleton is an amazing young English filmmaker. He's recently made a film called The Afterlight, and it is astonishing. It's not maybe a fictional in the sense that you would traditionally associate with that word, but what he has done, and other people have done this in the past as well, taken discrete little clips, but what our brains do, they want to turn that into a story. So what he has done is he's only taken footage of actors that have passed away. So the whole idea is to evoke them back to life, but he's also only chosen people who are alone in the frame. And they, I mean, the thing I can say, the shortest I can summarize it is together, it turns into this beautiful story where they kind of all meet in this fictional cafe. But your brain turns it into that story. You know very well that it all comes from different films. You even recognize some of the people.
Turns out to be a whole.
Yes, and you recognize that it's across decades, but you turn it into a fictional story, so to speak. So yes, that is being done. A lot less, indeed, a lot less frequent, as you say. Most of these sit on the experimental end of the spectrum, and then the most common example would be a documentary in which you use clips to underline the statement that you're making, right? But yeah, no, the whole spectrum is being.
Because when we think of accessibility as well, when we think of accessing the material,
yes,
yeah, the fiction films are sometimes much more commonly everywhere. So it's a new way of filmmaking for fiction filmmakers as well.
Yeah. But that's exactly, I think, where we see that tension between the archive and outside of the archive. I'll get to that in a little bit. So I've been looking at this kind of material for a very long time, and you know, it's exactly that access that has changed outside of the archive. So in the old days, where you still had to go to an archive to get a clip from, say, a very famous film like The Sound of Music, but if you would go to the Turkish archive, you would get a copy with Turkish subtitles. If you would go to the Dutch archive, you would get a clean copy from the internet in very high quality, and I'll show you an example of that. And all of a sudden, the cultural critique with which you can then engage by using that material has also been enlarged, right? So that's the important conclusion of that. What I would like to do with all the clips that I'm going to show you is actually illustrate that change that I highlighted. So from that analog to that digital era, and then we see those huge changes. And the changes are mostly creative, aesthetic, and legal. And that's those are the three changes that I'm gonna highlight. So I've put together a selection of clips. Like I said, some are in their entirety, some are in trailer form, or just a clip because the film is too long. Some of these are made for galleries. Some of them are much more accessible, or a political parody. For instance, I have a fun one from the UK, but also when Trump was president, we saw many of these videos. So I'm going to show you one of those as well. Yet others are more straightforward documentaries, as you said, which are perhaps the most expected form to bring in existing clips. I thought about it for a long time, whether I was going to show it to you, whether they were made inside of an archive or outside of an archive. But I've decided to show them in chronological order, and I'm going to tell you whether they have been made with or without an archive, because I think the change is more palpable if you see them in chronological order. And obviously, all those changes that I've just highlighted are going to be palpable in that chronological order a bit clearer. The legal change, I kind of quickly want to highlight these two things. Please look this up. The law itself hasn't necessarily changed, but these cultural practices around the laws have changed a lot. So in 2005, this is the best practices in fair use. This is an initiative by Professors Patricia Alterheide and Peter Yazzie of the American University in Washington. This code is nothing short of revolutionary, and I'm going to show you one clip of a film that was made right after this, which is incredibly important. So what they've done is put together representatives of the field of documentary filmmakers and discussed with them, what do you think is a normal practice? What do you think is fair? and by then codifying that language into a legal document, they have created this best practice, this code that filmmakers can use. And ever since that code, all filmmakers that have adhered to this code in the US, none of them have been sued, which for a litigious society as the US is, that's quite an astonishing feat. So please read this document. It's sort of free online. It's really insightful. And then Bartolomeo Milati and Stefan Hompel have recently published the EU version of this, or at least I need to say they've done a comparative research between the UK and the Netherlands, which is sort of a similar thing. Also specifically for documentary filmmakers, and they are in the process of seeing whether they can roll this out on a much more wider scale throughout more countries. So please look those up. I think they'd be really, really insightful for you as filmmakers to then see if you can use that material. Okay, so to introduce the clips. Like I said, I've made that division within the archive and outside the archive. Within the archive, of course, we have to do with rights holders. If you're a public archive, most of the material that you safeguard is not your ownership. On average, again, about 5% or so, anywhere up to maybe 20% of an archive, depends on what country you're from, is the ownership of the archive. But most of the time, you will be safeguarding someone else's material, and you have to have these great relationships with the rights holders because you're kind of doing this on their behalf. And then some archives take more risks than others. And so these cultural practices that are happening within those archives might actually vary from country to country, but also from archive to archive, and maybe even from person to person within those archives. And then so outside of the archive, particularly because we see the access to the material has changed, there's a little bit of a rebellion happening, like, maybe fighting a little bit against these constraints of copyright, the constraints of the archive. So we see a little bit more experimenting happening outside of the archive. And then with that comes perhaps pushing the boundaries a little bit. I know that we're being broadcast, and I know that this is recorded, and I do study film and copyright, but I'm not the copyright police. I rather come from the other end, because I always thought it was such a strange concept that you would have a list of things that you are not allowed to do. I have now over time switched solidly sort of to an ideal in between. I kind of like to think that you can see copyright as a creative manifesto. You can see it as things that you are allowed to do. You just have to use it in the right way. But I also think that it's not this constraining concept that I thought in the beginning that it was. But what I mostly would like to say is that in education and in art, I personally believe, this is not legal advice, I personally believe that everything should be allowed. You have the job, perhaps even legally. So I'm not here to profess these are the rules and this is what you have to do. I just want to show you a wide variety of what I think is really interesting work, but then you have to go out and push those boundaries yourself. Because if we would all be adhering to the rules, I don't think that this world would be.
So, it's going to be a little bit strange question. We talk about the copyright and the archives. I'm thinking like I've tried deep fake and the photo to video AI. I thought, okay, you can use me for AI. You can scan my face and using feature. But I think maybe 100 years ago, random raw footage. I thought can I use any random person from past and use AI to create a new scene or new actor, actress? You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, but are you? Is it okay if I say that I'm going to relay all AI questions to Larno to tomorrow? Because I think we're opening a can of worms that will prevent me from doing the rest of the presentation. Is that okay? Because I think it's a completely different topic, and I would love to speak to you about it, but I think if we open this now, then we're off to what I think he's going to address tomorrow. Is that okay?
I know that I'll address tomorrow.
Okay.
He'll do a whole day on this topic tomorrow. So, okay, cool. Anybody else? Yeah.
In further nuance
I need to come close this up.
question, there is a style of this archive, documentary or experimental, and you mean the Hollywood's styles of this archive. Maybe it refers that style. I don't know. Maybe Martin Scorsese's movie. There is a New York's archive, and we saw that. But in any report, you can specify these themes. I don't know. Maybe it's New York's city views, or I don't know. Maybe it's the war views. You can specify, and you can editing in this specifies in a new style of experimental or fictional editing style. You can do that in any additional style in that situation. Excuse my
No, I think I'm understanding what you mean. But are you asking whether you are allowed to?
No, not
whether
allowed.
You can.
I'm asking this question because of this. We are now selling our archives in, I don't know, Adobe stock videos.
Yes.
But in 1970s or 60s, there is not a thing like that.
Yeah.
And we are creating a new style of image contribution. That is a new modern era style. Is I'm really sorry, but I'm asking this to we can create a new style of archive editing styles. I'm asking that.
Yeah, I'm agreeing. Yeah, and I think the change that I'm going to show you is you're going to see that. You're going to see the new style of editing, especially because the access has enlarged. So I'm gonna show that. Yeah, you'll see it.
Is there a time limit in terms of copyrights to use?
Yeah, no, this is a really good question. Comes up all the time. There is lots of people think. Actually, in the second part, we'll pick this up. Lots of people think that there's a specific amount determined in the law, and it isn't. Allegedly, I've only just learned this last week, in Germany, apparently you're allowed to use 15 seconds of everything. But for instance, in the UK, under copyright exceptions, it says you are allowed to use as much as you need to make your argument. That is rather vague, but that's what you want. Because if you make the argument that something is of a, say you're making an audiovisual essay that Greek cinema has longer shots than, American cinema, then you want to be able to show a longer shot in order to make your point, right? Because if you were constrained, like you were only allowed to use 5 seconds, then you could perhaps not make your point. But the inverse is true too. If you want to show that American editing is faster than Greek, I'm just making this up, right? I'm not saying it's an actual example, then you want to be able to show something quicker. So usually, I mean, in the UK at least, the definition is not absolute. Where that tends to come from is that people make it workable. So for instance, our own library at the university says 10% of the book you're allowed to share with your students, or one chapter, whichever is maybe the least, I guess. Because they try to make it workable, but that 10% is not a number that is specified in the
And
law.
who decides on that number? Who decides on that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. People who think they have something to say about it. It does come from somewhere. So in the UK, there's one case that sort of has decided that 10% in that case was okay. So people have thought like, oh, that must be what that means. But on a daily basis, if you're in charge of sort of copyright related activities, say in a university library, then you're trying to make your job workable. So I think that's where these rules come from. They are cultural practices. They're not the written text of the law, which is really interesting, and it always comes up. But as far as I understand, it doesn't. Yes. I can't hear you. Sorry.
Yeah. If I'm making a project,
Yes.
and I'm using footage that's shot, for example, in the US,
Yeah.
should I follow the US law or the country that were based on?
Yeah. Very, very good question. It depends on where you use it, but there's a combination of things, and we'll pick that up in the second part as well. So, for instance, if something is in the public domain, that means that there are no rights anymore on the footage. That's a national concept. So what is in the public domain in the US might not be in the public domain where you are using it. So you have to use at a combination of, you have to look at a combination of all of those factors. But this is exactly one of the problems that we're facing, because distribution, particularly if you put something online, is such an instant, all over the world kind of thing. That's where it becomes really difficult. And these older materials, when they were shown rather underground in a random festival somewhere where there were 30 people, you didn't really have a problem. But if you put it online and you're using, I don't know, Disney, then see, that's a different issue. So usually it's the place where you're making your work, but then you have to think about your distribution model. But all of those rights questions I'll pick up in the second part. Okay? Cool. I'll show some clips, because otherwise we don't have enough time. The first one I would like to show you is Home Stories, Matthias' 6 minutes. He made a compilation of melodramas in the 50s of these women all doing similar things. But what is really important to notice for you guys, or to watch out for, is the so-called aesthetics of excess, which is a term by Lucas Hildebrand, because Matthias Müller has filmed these films off a television screen on 16 millimeters. So there's this mediation happening of that underlying material, which of course was a different situation in the 1990s, by creating your own version of it. I hope that makes sense. So he was shooting the film off the television screen. So it's about 6 minutes. Yeah, thank you. Yes,
This is it's in camera.
he's what, sorry?
You said that he was shooting it on 16 from the screen.
Yeah, no, I believe, no, I think it's, yeah, that's a good question. I don't think so. I think it was done separately because that would have been too difficult. Also, in terms of the broadcasting schedule of the films. But the point that I'm trying to make is this is shot off a television screen. If at that time you would have had to have gone to an archive to get permission for that material, arguably this was the only way to make that film. I think it's an important example of what was happening outside of the archive. Inside the archive, I want to show you a clip of Lyrical Nitrate. This is, at least for me, the film that changed everything when I first saw it. I was an undergraduate in Amsterdam, and we got to see this in class, and it just blew my mind. I wasn't familiar with silent cinema. I think the only thing I knew was Laurel and Hardy. I always thought that it was a comedy, everybody was walking really fast, and here you have this film that was put together by this beautiful lyrical material, and it's just astonishing. He does something wonderful in terms of the combination between sound and image. I'm going to show you a clip that sort of blew it out of the water for me, and what I want to highlight is Peter Lopud at the time was the adjunct director of the Netherlands Film Museum, and then arguably, and he says this himself in his publication, he had access to material that other people did not have access to, and this is what you'll see, because this clip at that time, it comes from a silent film, was not available to other people. So we had access on the solid inside of that archive to this astonishing material. And then they started playing with music, and he takes this very, very famous piece of opera and puts it under it, and I think elevates it to this sort of bombastic, amazing collaboration between sound and image. The entire film is available online. It's about 55 minutes, but I'm going to show you a 4 to 5 minute clip. We can turn off the light. Thank you.
idea is that that's re-edited to the opera. A film is
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I also realized, I mean, this clip does give a good impression of the film, but it's so complicated for a film that evolves its story over, an hour to sort of show you a clip and then give you a sense of the film. But I think it shows it really well what can be done in the combination of the music and maybe unusual music as well. And we have to see it in the light of 1991 as well. But what I wanted to highlight with the clip is this extreme privilege of access to really special material. We might be more familiar with this kind of editing and kind of material now, but at the time there was almost no way of coming in from the outside and then being given that kind of access to all this material.
And it turns out to be that it's also interesting to me that it's only a film. The material is the one film that is re-edited.
Exactly.
Mostly we are just very used to a mixture of different materials.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do have to say though that the entire film is not like that. There are chapters, and this is only one chapter, but it's exactly right. And that's also having the wealth of this material, right? Being able to play with that. So I think, it's rich in itself. You could do a whole lecture on just lyrical nitrate, I think. Now I actually realized that the next one I'm going to show, Telephones by Christian Marclay, is actually what you, Nihan, said about the fictional story, because this is about 6 minutes of a telephone conversation throughout film history. And what you do is you actually create the story in your head. It's one story, it's the arc of a telephone conversation, but throughout different genres. It's television, it's film, and black and white color, all sorts of. So it speaks to your question. Most of you will know Christian Marclay as the artist who made The Clock, the 24-hour art piece that shows clocks and mentions of time in film, of which I cannot show a clip because that's simply not available. Some people have shots and footage in some of the exhibitions which are online on YouTube. You can have a look, but it's not of good enough quality to show here. So this is sort of, I love this piece. It's sort of, I think, where he planted the seed for his later work. So this is from 1995.
Hello? Hello? Hello? Yeah. What? Yeah. Hello? Yes. Yeah. Hello. Hello.
Hello?
Hello, Felix. Hello?
Hello, Dave? Hello? Hello?
Hello. Hello.
Hello?
Hello, Jamie.
Listen, you. Oh? We're all fine. How are you? Oh? Yeah! Darling, where are you?
Darling, it's me. What? You're downstairs. Are you sure you have a positive ID? No, not exactly.
I'm so confused. I told you not to call here. Yes, I know.
I'm able to think or concentrate on anything except you. I see. Now what happened?
What makes you think it was me?
You certainly can.
I see.
You don't listen, do you?
No! Yes!
Yeah. No.
No, that's the worst thing you could possibly do.
Oh, I see. Now listen very carefully. But she doesn't know. But you understand that she doesn't know what happened.
No.
I'm sorry.
Good night, Mitch.
Call you back in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Okay. Bye-bye. Hello? Hello?
I'd love to next time.
Goodbye.
Get lost.
Hello? Hello? So that was all done from VHS, and none of those clips allegedly, right, were permitted by, or he didn't ask for permission from the rights holder. So very much outside of an archive, and allegedly, if you were to work with an archive, you couldn't possibly do this. So that was mid-90s. I want to highlight the work of Gustav Deutsch, Austrian filmmaker, and his series Film East 1 to 13. I'm only going to show you one chapter, number 1. Number 13 is feature length. It's called A Girl and a Gun. Some of you might have seen it. This is very much the opposite. This is very much going into the archive and then collaborating with those archives and archivists to put this work together. You'll see by sort of the standard of the image, not only in how special the material is, but also the quality of those transfers. And Gustav always said that it was particularly through the collaboration with the archivists that he was able to do his work. So he would ask something like, you know, have you ever seen a man walk from right to left through? So I'm going to show you one of those, and that's number 1.
Da in früheren Filmen nur 12 Aufnahmen pro Sekunde möglich waren, mussten diese damals durch Doppelkopieren auf 24 gestreckt werden. Heute können jedoch die wissenschaftlichen Auswertungsmöglichkeiten wesentlich verbessern.
Of course, much more experimental, but also partially due to the kind of material that you have access to. So a filmmaker that is almost, at least for me, inextricably linked to found footage and filmmaking is Bill Morrison, American. He's been invited to many archives to come work with their collection, including the one in Amsterdam. Decasia is a feature film from 2002. If you ever have a chance to see this on a big screen with the full sound, it's an astonishing experience. I'm only going to show you the trailer because I cannot do this film justice here in a clip, but it's put together almost entirely by decaying footage, which a lot of archives, because it's so beautiful sometimes, the way that the material actually decays, they preserve it as such, and he's worked a lot with decaying footage. So this is just the trailer for that film. didn't even realize it, but that last shot was the same clip as Lyrical Nitrate. This material arguably only exists within the confines of archives, unless maybe you would find it at a flea market or something. It's solidly based on the collaboration with archives. At the Library of Congress in Washington, there's even a shelf that says might be of interest for Bill. So when he comes by later, they keep the material separate for him, which is really lovely to see. The next example I want to show you, after which we're going to sort of see this slow break, is Los Angeles Place itself. Also, again, the trailer, because it's 3.5 hours long. It's an audiovisual essay on the role of the city of Los Angeles in film, and it's astonishing. It's, you know, the city as a background, the city as a character. If you can get a hold of a copy, please watch it. It's really amazing. Just like the previous example, this also the distribution of this was, now it's available everywhere, and you can buy it even on Blu-ray. But at the time that it came out, it sort of became this cult classic because it was so difficult to see. You could only see it at a handful of festivals. So it's amazing that all these years later it is now available on Blu-ray. This is Tom Anderson from 2003. And I'm going to show you also only the trailer.
This is the city, Los Angeles, California. They make movies here. I live here. Sometimes I think that gives me the right to criticize the way movies depict my city. I know it's not easy. The city's big. The image is small. It's hard not to resent the idea of Hollywood, the idea of the movies as standing apart from and above the city. People blame all sorts of things on the movies. For me, it's their betrayal of the native city. Maybe I'm wrong, but I blame them for the custom of abbreviating the city's name to LA.
So it's been remastered for a Blu-ray. I've seen Tom Anderson speak in a panel, and it was really interesting that he tried at the time, thousands and thousands of clips, he tried to get permission from the studios. He even had a budget for asking for permission, because what happens if you don't hear back? So he decided to go ahead with it. And it's now considered to be a really good example of fair use, that the transformative use of his clips into what he created is actually considered to be lawful. This is where we see the change a little bit. I love this clip, Gravity by Nicolas Provost from 2006. Arguably, I mean, maybe if you're a skillful editor and you have the right material, you would be able to do this. But I kind of want to argue that in digital, this was the only way to do it, because every 3 frames, the images change. I kind of want to give a warning because it's very, very flickering. So if that affects you, if you have tendency of not being able to cope with that material, just close your eyes, because it can be really, really intense the way it starts to flicker. I just want to warn you. But this is where we start seeing the change. This was all done from copying from DVD, no permissions, and solidly outside of an archive, because I've spoken to the filmmaker, and he said if that had to have been done with an archive, this film, had you gone to an archive, that would then have to work on behalf of the rights owners, right? So this was a really important landmark. In the interest of time,
can we say that, for example, in the structure, it turns out to be in a more documentary editing style.
Yes.
Is it also acceptable as a found footage filmmaking for this one? Because it's the interviews and some visuals from the films.
It's a very good question, because that's of course a matter of definition, right? So I have come to see found footage filmmaking not only what we have seen, sort of more experimental, artistic, gallery setting kind of material, but everything that uses existing material in it, because it is the material that is found, so to speak, or it is shot for another purpose, and you use it for a different argument. So in that sense, I would see that as found footage filmmaking, but of course that's something we can debate.
Yeah, it's something more that we are familiar.
Yes, this is much more acceptable as a sort of documentary style using clips, right? Yeah, exactly. I'll finish on two very short clips. One is only 30 seconds, and the other one is a trailer for a film. So we'll run a couple of minutes over, but I kind of want to highlight this. So this is important to set up. In 2007, it's actually astonishing to realize that we've only been carrying these around for 15 years. But the iPhone came out, and during the Oscars of 2007, Apple bought a clip or an advertising space, which apparently cost millions. They approached Christian Marclay for his telephones clip because they wanted to use it, and he said no. We can debate on what happened there, but he, of course, had a right to say, no, I don't want you to use my work. But what Apple did is they then took the underlying idea and made their own version of it, and then licensed all these really expensive clips, as opposed to his mode of working, which is great. He didn't ask for any of the permissions, and everything came from VHS. So the looks are, I think it's a really interesting project in itself, just to compare those two. This is only 30 seconds, and that was the very first iPhone commercial, but pay attention to being in a world where no one had ever seen anything that looked like this, right? This big thing with like a glass plate on it. So people did not know that this was a commercial. People assumed that it was an Oscar montage. And then at the end of the 30 seconds, you realize it's a commercial for this new thing that is going to come out 3 months later and then changes the world. So 30 seconds. Maybe I'll wait until you turn off the light. Yeah.
Hello? Hello?
Hello. Hi. How you doing there? Yo. Ow. Hello. Hello.
Hello?
Yo. Hello. Hello. Hello. Hello. Hello.
All right. So I'm assuming we can all see where the inspiration came from. Some of the shots are even the same. And then the final one, I'm going to skip a whole bunch. There's a couple of really great political parodies, but I'm sure you're all familiar with This Is Your World, right? The internet and parodies. But this is the one I would like to highlight. You might have heard of this. So Jackson, the famous Peter Jackson, or the Hobbit, and all the other films, was interested in the First World War and worked together with the Imperial War Museum in London. And it took many years to finish. They Shall Not Grow Old. The film is astonishing. If you've ever had the chance to see this on a big screen, it's incredible. It starts out in black and white, relatively small, and about half an hour later, it opens up to 3D and color, and you're in the war. It's colorized, it's scanned in 3D. he's hired people who can read lips. So there's people who then spoke their voices, so you actually hear what they're saying. Lots of archivists do not like this movie because of their purist ideas of what he's done to the footage. I absolutely think it's phenomenal, especially because he makes his intervention so transparent. The first 20 to 30 minutes is just in black and white, and the way that the footage is, and then he makes his intervention completely transparent and blows your mind by transporting you to that world. I had wanted to end on a more positive note because this is a rather dark, a dark film about a really terrible war. But it's as a film, I think it's an astonishing document. So here is the trailer.
I was 16 years old and my father allowed me to go.
I was just turned 17 at the time.
I was 16.
I was 15, yes.
When they came to us, they were frightened children and had to be made into soldiers.
Of course, here he comes with the pictures. I gave every part of my youth to do a job.
There was a job to be done. You just go on and did it.
All right. Yeah, so apologies for not being able to show all of them, but I think this sort of gave you a sense of how this has changed, and maybe we have a minute or so for an immediate question. Otherwise, I would love to speak to anyone who has any questions over lunch, and then of course we have the entire afternoon. But if there's any burning question right now, maybe an immediate response to anything that we've seen, then I'll gladly take that now. Yes.
Claudy, there has always been manipulation, image and video footage manipulation in the history. But when we think about found footage, the first thing that comes to my mind is that the black and white image that have authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
and especially for non-fiction filmmaking and film, the concept of authenticity is so important. And with the coming of digital era and with the 0-1, then the image manipulation and also creating the lies is so much easy.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, what do you think about the concept of authenticity when we think about the footage, found footage? Because we see fictional ones and also non-fiction one.
Yeah.
Then there's a kind of conflict now,
Yeah.
especially in the time of post-truth era.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that question. I think we can organize a separate event on just that question. A couple of immediate responses is this is also why I said that in light of Peter Jackson's film. I really like that he makes his intervention transparent. Like he tells you 20 or 30 minutes into the film, this is what I did to the material. So I think that's really important that you get that sense. I also am astonished that I now live in a world where everything I see I need to mistrust. Like it's by definition fake. Whereas I grew up in a world that was like, if you see it, right, you can believe it. That might not have been true either, but it's a little the opposite right now. I agree with you that you say non-fiction is a little bit more traditionally black and white, and this whole idea of authenticity. But the idea that we connect black and white and to an authentic past is sort of problematic in itself, right? Because especially as that intertitle showed, these people did not live in a black and white world. So that in itself is an interesting concept. In fiction, in fictional or everything else that's not considered to be non-fiction material, it was very normal that things were shown in color, even in the silent era. We might not remember it as such because that material has often been preserved in black and white, but more than 90% of the silent era was shown in color and with music. It was never silent and it was never black and white. So it's also our understanding of the past. But in light of this workshop, I would like to go back to William Wace's definition that found footage films, they invite you in to look at the construction of it, right? So you are constantly faced with this idea that it has been put together. And so you question the authorship, what is ownership, what is a film, what is film history, and what is the archive? And I think if you look at it as the construction of a found footage film, then it invites you in to look at it as such. And I find that really powerful. I don't even know if I started to answer your question, but I think authenticity and the creative reuse of audiovisual material is a great next workshop. All right, I don't want to stand between you and it up, and maybe inspired a little bit, and then hopefully after lunch we can pick this.
It was really inspiring, and it was enlarging with the definition of found footage for me. We will be going on by 1 o'clock after the lunch again here. Till then, see you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. If I had yeah.